Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, with episode 140. Got started a little bit late tonight. We had some technical problems. That is the price of working by yourself here, I guess. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's having a great new year. And here we are, and here we go. Hey, I've got some interesting news. The Stratosphere Lounge banner, which has been in the back of that wall over there for many, many years, has been replaced with a 73-inch 4K monitor, a television, really. Why, you might ask? Have I removed my trusty Stratosphere Lounge logo banner and replace it with a significantly smaller 4K TV? Well, because right now and for the last week or so, I've been scrambling like crazy to bring something else in. We're so understaffed here. But what we're really excited about, what I'm really excited about certainly, is the fact that starting on Inauguration Day, I mentioned this I think last week, I'm going to start doing a live show daily. And I didn't know what to call it, and I thought maybe I'll call it Stratosphere Lounge. No, that belongs to us, and that's different. We do a show for members called Nexus Report, which is not out as often as I would like. And even if I called it that, I'd have the same problem, which is, nobody knows how to find you, Bill. I had marketing guys talk to me a couple of years ago 3-4 years ago now, I guess, before I launched BillWhittle.com, and I said, what should we call this thing? Should we call it, Firewall.com or something? He said, why don't we call it BillWhittle.com? Because you're in Afterburner, Trifecta, Firewall, and a host of, of other things with nobody knows your name. So I think I'm probably going to call it Bill Whittle Live. In any event, we talked about it a little bit last time, and now we've actually bought some hardware, so I'll tell you basically how it's going to go. Most of you guys have seen the area behind me here through the Stratosphere Lounge and so on. We are going to be doing something that's almost the exact opposite of that. So let me, I should have had more light over there, but that's okay. So over here is a whole part of the set of the room that never gets seen by anybody. And I am going to be taking that area in front of the white wall, and I'm going to be putting a little coffee table there, and I've got the groovy space chairs there. And the main thing I'm really excited about is, Natasha's such a brilliant person when it comes to lighting. I'm going to basically turn that whole area into kind of like my, menagerie Star Trek cage, and so every day I'm gonna start the show, and I suspect I'll start it at the desktop up there, go over the daily news stories. Maybe I'll call that segment of it the Nexus Report. Talk about that for several minutes, and then after that, I can get up and I can walk around. I can sit on the couch. I can faint if the news is particularly awful, and just get the vapors and faint dead away. So it'll give me a chance to move around a little bit. We've also ordered a professional microphone. We had the Yeti. One of the reasons I was late was I had the Yeti hooked up, which is a nice microphone, nice-ish, but there's some kind of vibration coming through the desk, and it was just making all this noise. In any event, we're going to be basically doing that area over there, and I'm still trying to figure out what the show's going to be, which is why I wanted today to be the looking ahead episode of the Stratosphere Lounge. So Cheryl Toomey just asked in the comments how long will the show be. I think it will certainly will be 30 minutes, and it might be 45 to an hour, knowing me. But just to recap, I've had offers to do radio shows for a long time, and I've sat in for Rusty Humphreys 4 or 5 times, so I can certainly do the 3-hour talk, as you well know. But the problem has been my schedule's been so fluid. Sometimes I'm up till 2 or 3 in the morning and getting up later and sleeping late and back up again, putting in incredible long days here. And then finally, the NRA offer came along, and I just decided this is really what I need more than anything. Is I just need to be in a place at a chair at the same time every day. So my NRA segment is every day at 10 o'clock from 10 to 10 after 10, and I think we're going to do it probably at 10:30 or 11 at the latest. That would be my guess. I just got out of another marketing meeting with people who know something about marketing. For those of you who've been fans for a long time, you know basically my business model is relatively unsophisticated. If I were Nike, my business strategy would be to make the best shoes in the world, leave them outside the factory door overnight, and hope that somebody comes by and buys a pair. And as it turns out, bigger companies and companies that have a little more financial success understand things like marketing and sales and advertising and all the rest. So I was talking to some very, very smart people, new set of smart people, and both of them good friends of mine, and we're going to really figure out how we're going to basically roll this thing out. But we do know a couple things, I think. We know that on the day, I'm talking about the Daily Show now, Bill Whittle Live Show, every single day, the audio will go out for everybody, and that will be up to SoundCloud and from SoundCloud over to iTunes. So finally, after a mere 3 or 4 or 5 years of doing this, you'll be able to get a podcast of the show, and that'll be free to everybody. I suspect what I'll probably do is a Facebook Live introduction for 5 minutes, maybe just go over a little bit the stories of the day, and then after that, we have to take it down to the members and basically do it that way with luck and a little bit more staffing, because it's impossible to find in-house staff here. But it'd be nice to do like a little 3 or 4 minute cut down of the show every day and put that out on Facebook to promote it. But it's certainly, certainly past time for the members to get a little more value. And also, it's about the only real leverage I have in terms of getting new members from our existing mailing list. So I've just been thinking about nothing but it, and I'm very, very excited about that. Also, we finished the first of the TPUSA videos called Money, and I'm going to release that in the next day or two. 3 minutes, 3:03. 3:03. I mean, that's darn near a 2-minute number. Very tight, very simple, straightforward. I'm very, very happy with it. And I'll be releasing that soon. It's up at the BillWhittle.com page. I think it's open now. I don't think it's behind the pay firewall anymore. So basically, we got two things really that we're looking forward to an awful lot coming up for this year, and then we'll take your questions. So the two of them are, of course, this whole new series of shorter single issue videos with a whole new look, a much cleaner look, and a much more just a lot more savvy look, a lot more Apple look, I guess. So that'll be 5 days a week, probably at 10:30, certainly at 11. And we will be doing that every day. The podcast will go out live. The audio will go out live. We'll probably do some of the Facebook Live for the first 5-10 minutes, and then we'll go into the relaxed session where I can get out of the desk and just kind of walk around the room and rant and rave for the members. So that's a big deal. And we had a question. I don't know if it's one I wrote down later, but if not, I'll take it now. You know what? Maybe this is it right here. It might be our cue to walk right into these. Here it is. Yes. Okay. So anyway, that's what's coming up here, and we're really, really excited about it. I've got to shoot another one of these short videos today. Socialism. I get to talk about socialism today. Try to keep that to 3.5 minutes. I'll try to post the NRA stuff on a daily basis. Really, right now, what I need more than anything is a media manager. I need somebody in-house managing media and getting it where it needs to go. Doing things exactly like linking to today's NRA segment. I just don't have the time. I'm just editing like a crazy man and trying to write. So tonight we're going to shoot socialism. We got capitalism's already in the bag. I had to rewrite socialism a little bit. And that's what I'm going to be doing after the show. So we're going to try and keep this a little bit quicker because when I'm done, I'm going to hop in the back there with a green screen and record this socialism thing and keep these TPUSA videos coming and really up the, up the volume. In any way, well, Aesop's Retreat, our friend Jim has said, socialism in 3.5 minutes. Good luck with that. We can do it in 3.5 minutes. I can do it in 4 for sure, Jim. So here we go. Okay, finally. I'm sorry. We had here. It's been a rough day, folks. Sorry about that. Here it is. This is the question that I was going to take that talks about the Stratosphere launch future. And it's from Carlos Pinheiro, sorry. And he basically says, I would suggest look into the idea of moving the Stratosphere Lounge in the future to YouTube Live. No video ad interrupts, live monetization that will help the organization, shorter wait time in waiting for the upload for YouTube. It allows the use of many cam programs with PC and Mac. Allows 2 upstream links to help prevent choppiness. All followers with bell indicators will get a push notification when you're on. The live can be viewed on many devices, including smart TVs, and you can shorten plus mute the music post live online to prevent the flagging, included the need to re-upload. That is my pitch for the show. Carlos, are you currently employed? And if not, do you live in Los Angeles, and would you like to be? That would be tremendous. That's exactly what we're going to do. We ordered some new hardware. I mentioned a much better microphone. We're going to start doing the show with these webcams. These webcams that we're using now, what are they? Who are they? Logitech 920s are very good. And this is not at the highest resolution. These cameras will get sharper than this. So we've got new cameras, we've got new lights, we've got a new screen, we're going to have a new look, we're going to have new everything. And I'm really, really excited about that for the new stuff. But I think the Stratosphere Lounge has to go to Facebook Live. I can't think of any reason to keep it here. Although, God knows, Ustream has been good to us for 5 years now, something like that, somewhere in that vicinity, 4 or 5 years. But as he said, and by the way, Carlos, I genuinely had no idea, none, about all of these other benefits. I knew that it was on Facebook Live, which meant it was on Facebook, and that's about all I knew of it. The only Facebook Live events I've seen have been the right angle shows that we did for Facebook, and I'm getting to that in a minute, Cheryl Toomey. And so when we do right angle live, the live stream actually comes from Scott, but Scott is also taking in my image and it's also taking in Steve Green's image, and that slows things down and reduces the quality. So when I look at the Facebook Live segments, even though they're lit exactly like this, I just think they look awful, just awful. But I will definitely be doing it a couple of tests at a higher resolution. And honestly, Carlos, I really can't thank you enough for this. I had no idea there were that many advantages to it. So looking forward to that. That's going to be great. And that's where the Stratosphere Lounge is going to move to. It'll be archived automatically on Facebook. We'll record to disk, so we'll have a disk archive. We'll upload that disk archive to YouTube, and it'll be on, and you'll get your notifications, so on. I am giving serious thought to the idea of starting. Inauguration Day is a good day to start because you need something new. That's good. I can say, fought Barack Obama. Genuinely did. I fought him pretty much every day in his policies for the time he was sworn in until the time he was sworn out. Now it's time to start going forward and retaking some territory and, going back on offense. So we're starting this thing today. And I might do, on Friday the 20th, I might do a 24-hour telethon. Might just do it. I might do a 24-hour telethon, and as my vital life force bleeds slowly away, hopefully people will be inclined to sign up for the BillWhittle.com membership, because I think the show's going to be really cool. And by the way, we do have 2 chairs over there, and that means we're going to get actual guests in here, and that's going to be fun too. So there you go, Carlos. Now Cheryl Toomey has a question somewhat related to this. And this one I really feel bad about. She said, it would be nice if there were announcements for Right Angle Live, especially if the show is going to be canceled. I end up refreshing for about 10 minutes, not knowing either way. I'm awful sorry about that. We missed 2 of them in a row because of the holidays. The Monday that we normally do the the conference call on was both holidays, Christmas and New Year's. And then that meant we had to do the conference call on Tuesday morning because the other guys and I were just not around. Well, I was around. So we had to move it back. So we would record the backstage show on Tuesday. We'd have a 2-hour gap, and then we had to do 4 more shows. Yeah, 1 each plus a member show. And to get all of that done in a day, starting at 1 instead of at 11, just couldn't do it. But you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. I should have put up a notice about that. And I suspect that once we start doing the live show in the morning, that'll probably do it for the Facebook Live right angle, but don't quote me on that because I don't have any idea what's really going on, as usual. Steve Darrow has a question for us. He says, to stay on tonight's topic, in your series for Turning Point USA, will you devote a piece to how do you know you are right? You've touched on this a number of times in bits and pieces, but I thought it would be good to have a single segment where you discuss the critical thinking process and the steps you go to determine what is right, which is a great lead into a question that I got that I'll deal with in a minute. Here's a great example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. We did a show a couple weeks ago where Scott basically said that New York Times did a report, and I went, oh, okay, here it comes. But it was a report from the Heritage Foundation that said that the kind of voter fraud that we consider to be the one that we're worried about, people going in to vote without IDs and multiple voting and illegals voting, Heritage has looked at this very, very carefully, apparently, and said to say it doesn't happen is obviously nuts, and 300 million people, something's going to happen. But it is literally a handful, 10 or less, provable cases in the last 8 years or something. And so to go to your issue about when do I know I'm right, I know I'm right when I hear something that goes against what I believe, and I dredge myself out of what I want to believe into what appears to be true. I loved, as I said on that show, I loved my voter ID. And by the way, I haven't changed my mind on voter ID, but I loved the idea of thinking that that this voter fraud was that prevalent. I remember Acorn. I remember all of this stuff. And it turns out that it's one of the things that probably just isn't so. And so I'm not gonna stand on that ground anymore. If somebody provides really compelling case that it is actually there, then I'll take a look at that report, and I'll weigh it against the Heritage report, and we'll see which one smells most like the truth. But that's really the process, is just simply understanding that sometimes you have an emotional reaction to, in fact, all the time nowadays, because our whole society is so politicized, you have an emotional reaction to this kind of a news thing, and you don't want to change, but I would rather be right. So it's a difficult thing to get in the habit of. One of the things that is always keeps me honest is if something sounds too good to be true, then almost certainly it's not true. But the effort to find the truth is what I do, and I spend a lot of time on it. And when I mess up, which doesn't happen too often, I'm not trying to brag, it's just I'm very careful. When I do mess up, and just even a little thing wrong, even if I get a spelling error wrong, it just follows me for days. I said Leon Panetta instead of John Podesta on the last Firewall I did, I think. And I just came in, re-recorded it, recut it, re-edited it. It was just terrible mistake. But they happen sometimes. I think the deeper question, obviously, Steve, is, in the world, how do you know something is right? Well, there's a couple ways to do that. One of them is to use common sense. Here's the part that's actually interesting, I think, on this issue. And I owe this to the late, great Stephen Denbest, I think. I didn't really understand this, but apparently this is how it works. The HAL 9000 was the programmed, never mind. Heuristically programmed analog something or other. Forget that. It was Steve Denbest that talked to me about the idea of heuristics. Now, there are so many people, whenever I talk about anything on this show, I've always got many people, and most of them are watching live, who know more about this than I do, a lot more. So this is not an area where my knowledge is terribly deep, but as I understand it, we function, our intellects function, and our behavior systems and our morality and our world outlook, all of that is learned heuristically. And again, as I understand it, a heuristic is an argument that is a heuristic is a building block of data that you don't have to keep retesting. And a great example of this would be if you are young or old and you put your hand and you see a glowing orange stove top, the old coil ones, and it's glowing red hot. If you touch that, you don't have to touch it every single time it comes on to learn that it's hot. You learn it one time. You build in your head a heuristic, and the heuristic basically says glowing red burner hot. And if you've got enough intelligence, you may actually use that information usefully and translate that into glowing red anything hot. And so you start to build this kind of a worldview based on the things that you know to be true. Now, down at the low level, virtually everybody has the same heuristics. Virtually, there's not many people out there who don't understand that if you touch something that's red hot, you're going to get burned. It's something we just learn. But as these things get more and more complex, then they start to drift away from the actual evidence. So sometimes you have to just look at the structure of what you believe, not just the data points, not just one particular issue, but how they all work together, how they all match. And I could just give you an example here, because this, by happy coincidence, was just put on my desk by Carla when I came in back after my meeting here before the show. And this is from Zach Hassan. So I'm just going to use this example because it literally just appeared on my desk, and it's probably a good thing to do. All right, here we go. Hi, Bill. I've recently stumbled across flat earther videos on YouTube. Two consistent arguments that they seem to make are related to pilots and flight. Number one, pilots don't fly in straight lines to their destinations, instead taking long, arcing, seemingly out-of-the-way routes. Think of going from Detroit to Germany flying down from the UK. And number two, if pilots fly level with the horizon and keep their elevators level, shouldn't they eventually crash since they're not constantly pointing their nose upwards to fight gravity? I'd like to see a steely-eyed missile man like yourself knock some sense into these flat earth Neanderthals. Okay, let's get started. To the first point, when you look at a map, and if I were to take my fiance's route from Moscow to Los Angeles, you would think that it would basically come across maybe just right around the middle of Great Britain, fly around and come in, land on the eastern seaboard, to break, somewhere maybe Maryland, and then just fly across the U.S. and get to Los Angeles. And you would think that would be the fastest and shortest route. And if we lived on a flat world, it would be. The fact that they're asking this question is defeating their own argument, because that curved path on a flat surface, on a flat map, is evidence that the Earth is round. Because if you take that flight that you were just talking about, Zach, if you take the Detroit to Germany flight and you do it on a globe with a piece of string, you will find that the route that the airline has flown is the shortest piece of string that you can possibly do it on. It's the shortest distance. And if you stretch it out over a globe, you will see it is, in fact, an absolutely straight line. It's 100%. It looks distorted on a flat map because all maps are distorted. This is called the Greenland effect, by the way. It's highly recommended because we've all seen the map of the Earth so many times, the Mercator projection map. And so we've had this map in our head of what the Earth looks like forever. I mean, just ever. And it's always been a flat map. But I would encourage you strongly to either get an old-fashioned globe or get something like Google Earth or anything where you can see the Earth and rotate it in 3D, and you will be astonished at how different the Earth truly really is since it's round. Africa is the size of North America, South America, Australia, 2 or 3 other, India, put together. They put them all inside of Africa. The Mercator projection tends to compress things at the equator and expand them out at the poles because they're trying to get a curved surface onto a flat one. This is evidence that the Earth is round. That curved line on a flat surface is evidence that the Earth is round, because, as I said, if you do it on a globe, you won't have any problem with this at all. You'll find that if you take a piece of string, and one's on Detroit and the other one's in Berlin, and you just move it around, you will find that the shortest path from one to the other is, in fact, to go damn near over the North Pole. I flew to, I knew what was happening, but it was still astonishing. I flew to Thailand back in 2012, and I didn't give it a lot of thought, obviously, I just thinking about it. I thought the plane's going to take off. We're going to fly off to the west. We'll probably pass somewhere south of Hawaii, I guess, somewhere in there. And we'll come in from the ocean, right around the latitude of Bangkok. Maybe we'll go a little bit over the Japanese islands, or we might see something like that, see some tropical islands south of Hawaii, something like that. Anyway, the plane gets off the ground, and it makes a right turn, and this plane starts heading almost due north. In order for me to fly from Los Angeles to Thailand, I had to fly the entire west coast of the United States, the entire west coast of Canada. I flew directly over the Aleutian Islands up in Alaska, and then we started to come down through northern China. I think we came down over North Korea, and it seems to you that you're going pretty much due north and then pretty much due south. And the reason it seems that to you is because that's exactly what you're doing. You could go from Los Angeles straight west around the Earth and get to Thailand, but that would be a longer route than the one that they take being polar. Those routes are determined very simply. Those weird kind of paths. Natasha basically going from Moscow directly north through Finland up north of Iceland, virtually the North Pole, and then coming down through the middle of Canada instead of coming in from the east and North Carolina. The reason they do that is to save flight time, and they do it to save fuel, and it works like a charm. I don't know if that is the exact definition of great circle navigation. I think that's actually something different. But as far as your flat earther people, you can tell them the fact that the line looks curved on a flat surface is in fact evidence that the Earth is round, because if you look at it on a round surface, you will find that it is in fact a straight line. So there's number one argument out the door. And this is how we kind of do it, by the way. Where is it? Steve? Was it Steve? Yeah. How do we know we're right? So that's number one. We can reason it out. If somebody tells me that the Earth is flat, and the evidence is that these planes take these weird courses, then we start breaking down the problem. If the Earth was flat, why isn't it a straight line? The fact that it's not a straight line means the Earth's not flat, right? And then you figure out that if you put it on a globe and it all makes sense and so on. This other one's awful cool too. If pilots fly level with the horizon and keep their elevators level, shouldn't they eventually crash, since they're not constantly pointing their noses upward to fight gravity? I'd love to see a steely-eyed missile man like yourself knock some sense into these flat Earth Neanderthals. Well, first of all, if you fly level to the horizon long enough, you will crash. But it'll be because you run out of fuel. There's a joke I like very much that was told, I think it was Lufthansa pilots. And Lufthansa was flying Boeing 747s, and they were also flying the I want to say it's the A340. It's the four-engine, but it's not the giant A380. I think that's right. In any event, the 747 Lufthansa pilots had a joke at the expense of the A320 pilots, and they said the joke was, what makes the A320 gain altitude? And the answer is the curvature of the Earth. And I just thought that was hilarious. In other words, that plane is so underpowered it just flies straight and the Earth falls away underneath it. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about a plane in level flight. So let's break this one down. Let's say you're at 30,000 feet and you've got a carpenter's level, and you put it on the floor of the airplane, and you find that the plane is absolutely level. It's 100% level, and you are wondering why you're not crashing to the ground. The reason is because while the airplane is level, the wings aren't level. I want to say that's the angle of incidence. It is, I think. If you look at an airplane from the side, you'll see that when it's sitting on the ground, it's perfectly horizontal. The cabin is perfectly horizontal, but the front edge of the wing is considerably higher than the trailing edge of the wing. So the plane is moving forward through the air level, but the wing itself has not only an angle to it. It has curvature to it. This also goes to the fact that they don't understand much about aerodynamics, because a plane does not fly because of thrust. It's not the it does obviously, but it's not just thrust that's keeping it in the air. In other words, the plane is not being held aloft by the power of its jet engines shooting down. There's virtually no airplane in the world. There's a handful of fighters that will actually go up, can accelerate straight up. Virtually every other plane in the world is just got enough power. So the answer is, you're flying level, the wing is at an angle. The wing is at an angle, and that's what allows the lift to continue all along the wings, and all the engines are doing is moving it forward. Now, this is one of the things that guys like Burt Rutan talk about when you're talking about trying to get things up into space. If you try to get something straight up, if you try to lift it straight up the ground, you've got to have nothing but pure thrust. That means big engines. It means lots of fuel, lots of oxidizer, and so on. But if you're only trying to push it a little bit sideways, that's much less energy, because the wings are doing the work. The wings are doing the work. It's lift. So that is the answer to their question, and they can prove it to themselves the second they go on an airplane, or the second they go look at their books or whatever it is, their cave drawings, whatever they're using. You could make a case for the flat Earth in the Middle Ages. It wasn't a good case, because the F-4 could not go vertical. Dave Wellman says the F-15 can go vertical. It is the first plane ever built, I think, in any numbers anyway, that has a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1. An F-15 Eagle can point itself on its tail, nose straight up in the sky, and accelerate. That was the first plane that could do it. The F-4, I don't think, even came close. In any event, so we look at these things with these people with these kind of comments, and you say the flat Earth, there are people been in space, there are people in orbit. It's just I think half of these people are trolling you, to be honest with you. But even in the Middle Ages, you knew you couldn't really measure, you couldn't really count on a flat Earth for a couple different reasons. The main one is that ships disappear over the horizon. That's not something you can explain on a flat Earth. On an exceptionally clear day, especially with a telescope, small telescope, if you look straight out to sea, you could see the masts, the top part of the sails, before the main part of the boat. And as the boat got closer and closer and closer, it looked like the masts and the sails were coming out of the water. And that's exactly what was happening, because they were traveling on a curved surface towards your line of sight. And people just, a lot of people think that most people thought the Earth was flat, that nobody understood that the Earth was round until Galileo and or somebody. But no, the ancient Greeks had it figured out. Had it figured out ingeniously, by the way, ingeniously. They stuck a stick in the ground in one location, and then someplace 200-300 miles away, they did it at another location. And they made sure that both of these sticks were completely vertical. And then, using their primitive time pieces, but whatever they had, they measured the shadow angle at the same time at noon, let's say. And since one of these sticks was a little bit further south than the other one, it's casting a different shadow. And they were able to do it with math. And they were very close, very close. I think they said 7,800 or something, or it's actually 8,001, something very close. So this whole flat Earth thing is, a flat Earth and flat universe and flat everything else. There's nothing up there. If the Earth is flat, what's beneath it? What's it resting on? The stars appear to go around us. That's just because we're rotating. That's another example, by the way. The fact that the stars are moving is evidence that this Earth is rotating. So, in answer to your question, Steve, you can build heuristically pretty good arguments if your fundamentals are strong. And, I taught astronomy for quite a while. I'm pretty strong in astronomy. I'm pretty strong in aviation. And my heuristic knowledge goes deeper. So if somebody gives you a top-level question, something that's a very complicated question, because to be honest with you, it is a somewhat complicated question, you have to be able to break it down into smaller arguments, and then you have to have the information, or go find the information necessary to resolve this issue. As always, Occam's razor applies. given everything else being equal, the more simple explanation is almost certainly true. So, you could have lots and lots of explanations for missiles and missing airplanes and thousands of witnesses and hundreds and hundreds of air traffic controllers, and you can do all of that stuff. Or you could do what you saw happen right in front of your eyes, which is some people hijacked an airplane, flew it into a building. It's pretty simple, really. And by the way, let me just close on that. There is a quality to flat earthers and 9/11 inside job guys and moon landing was a hoax guys and those kind of guys. There is a pattern to them, and the pattern is, generally speaking, they're extremely antisocial people. This mom's basement thing actually does come from someplace. I've met a few of them, and the ones that I've met, big UFO champions, went over to their house to have a debate with them, and they're just not social people. They're hermits. They live in their own head, in their own little world, and they don't get out much. And so, what I think happens when you have like the Kennedy assassination thing, or you have the moon landing thing, or you have the 9/11 thing, people get a sense that they're special, that they have special knowledge, that they're smarter than other people, or they're more educated than other people, that they can handle things. Emotionally, they're more secure, that they can handle things that the sheeple out there can't handle. And I think that's their way of kind of getting revenge on society. I'm not saying every single person is this way, but I think it's a real strong trait. You have antisocial people who are shunned, and I've never seen one of them ever making any reasonable income, because you can't make reasonable income if you think the earth is flat. So I think the thing that's such an emotional draw for them is it convinces them by picking a very few dots and trying to draw a straight line through them. It convinces them that here at home, after hours of study and having read the right books, I'm on to the inner workings of things, and I see it, and all of those successful, happy people out there don't. And it's just, it's amazing what they will believe. This one guy was talking about had a picture, he had a video of something, I think he called them rods, new kind of alien rods. They appear on video and they're long, and at the end they've got like these little spiky things. And he's giving me this frame by frame. He says, watch frame by frame by frame by frame. And sure enough, after 30, 40, 50 frames or something, this thing comes in, and this elongated thing comes in and goes around and flies out of the frame and so on. And he says, how do you explain that? And I said, can I see that in real time, please? And he played it in real time. It's just a bee. It's honest to God just a bee flying across the screen, leaving a little motion streak. And then you have to really say, okay, look, dude, that one is nonsense, and you know it. You created it. I've seen pictures of UFOs that were in formation that looked like a bunch of ovals flying in a V formation, and they're geese, but they're also not just geese, but they're geese that has been blown up in the video just like 700, 800, 900%. They're just digital artifacts. You can't see the neck of the goose. Well, you can't see the leaves on the trees either. It's just an image that's very far away. So anyway, TG Gecko has the comment of the night. I think he said that the Titanic was an inside job. Icebergs can't break steel rivets. I could make a case for that, TG. I really could. I could run with that. I could run with that and just say, look, here's a block of ice. Here's a piece of steel. I'm going to take the block of ice and go bang, 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 bang. See, the steel is stronger than the ice. The ice eventually cracks and falls apart. Therefore, the Titanic was sunk by a German submarine or whatever the hell else I want to say. And again, as with the steel in the 9/11 thing, you realize that they're presenting to you a very small set of data where certain things are actually true, but that is not what happens in larger scales or with larger things. In the case of the Titanic, you've got you don't have a little brick of ice, because if somebody threw an ice cube against the Titanic, the Titanic would not have sunk having struck an ice cube, and the Titanic would not have sunk having struck a beach ball made of ice, and it wouldn't have sunk if it struck something the size of bus. But when you strike a mountain, essentially, of which 9/10 is underneath the water, the mass of that ice is so extraordinary that it will in fact cave in the side of a steel boat, and that's why it happens. And there's a terrific video online. It's one of my favorites. It's by a guy who's an iron worker, and he comes out into his shop, and he says, "I just want to talk to I want to address something about these idiots who are saying that steel, couldn't have been melted by the World Trade Center." So he gets this steel bar, and he puts it in a like a hole in an anvil, and he pulls on it really, really hard, and he tilts the anvil. He said, "This is a regular steel bar, and you can see that the steel is very strong enough for me to tilt this anvil," and so on. He says, "Now, I'm going to put this in the furnace," and he puts it in the furnace, and it comes out, and he says, "This steel, you'll notice, is not melting. In fact, the thing's not even bending or drooping. It looks just like red hot steel." But he puts it back into that holder and pulls on it, and the steel's just like a wet noodle. It's going wherever he wants it to. He says steel doesn't have to melt in order to lose its strength. Any other questions, idiots? And off he goes. Those things, that's the end of the argument. When you see something, you can be misinformed about things, and that's okay, because everybody's misinformed about things. But when you see something like that, when you see a steel bar reduced to spaghetti and yet holding its shape, you realize that what they say is true. It was hot enough to weaken the steel. You've got 7, 10, 15, 20 stories in one case, and more like 30 or 40 of concrete sitting on top of these steel structures, half of which have been destroyed by this kinetic energy of this incoming airplane. Of course it could happen. And it did. And we all saw it. And when we watched it, there's not one person in the world who watched those videos live who said, "This is a government operation. Look at that little flash underneath the airplane. It's not a real airplane." Anybody who's half sane who watched this stuff on the air said, "My God, somebody's flown an airplane into that building." And my God, the building collapsed because it's been on fire for an hour and it's got gigantic, huge holes in it. And then after the fact, people start thinking about how they're going to be special, and then they start talking about shadows on the moon, and they start talking about all these other things. Every single one of them can be defeated, and when you get to the point where you've defeated 4 or 5 of them, and they keep falling back, in other words, if they present their strongest evidence up front, and you knock it down pretty much effortlessly, and then they go to their second position, you knock that down. They go to the third position, you knock that down. You go to the fourth position, you knock that down. They won't stop. They'll call it a tie because they've still got 35 or 40 arguments to make. But if their best arguments, the ones they're leading with, are that easy to disprove, then what does that tell you about the other little things they've built their entire worldview on? It's a disease, and it's getting worse, and it's a form of virtue signaling. If only to yourself. It's a way of telling yourself, and maybe the other few enlightened people who are in on the thing. It's a way for them to feel smarter and stronger mentally, and more informed and special. They're special. And by the way, the idea that this was a government operation suits them too, because it means not only are they clued in, but they're also kind of fighters in a way, right? They're like spies or rebels. They're the ones out there in the information that the corporate death machine hasn't reached yet, and they could be at any moment could be just taken out. Somebody with an umbrella just pop, inject a radioactive dart with them, or maybe one night a black helicopter is going to come and take me away because I'm so damn important that I understand these things that nobody else understands. And it just isn't so. Open up the windows, go outside, walk down, get a hamburger, sit there, smile at people, and eventually your moon landing theories and your 9/11 theories and your UFO theories and your John F. Kennedy theories will go away. And I'll spend some time on the Kennedy thing too, because there's somebody I respect very much who still believes that, and it's pretty easy to knock down, I think. Okay, so here we go. Allo Conson wants to know, will you do a brief shareable videos on truth? I think I put these together because they're related. Truth exists, it's knowable, it's discoverable, and it's verifiable. To claim there is no truth is to immediately refute oneself. Please hammer this home repeatedly for the benefit of the rising generation. I just talked about that at length, Alla, but I will say one thing here. It's knowable, it's discoverable, and it's verifiable. Back to the voter fraud thing. I'd heard many stories, and these stories got amplified about voter fraud, and that voter fraud was going to swing the election. I actually thought it might swing 2 or 3 points, could win the election. When a reputable company who is on our side, a reputable organization like Heritage Foundation, when they say, we've looked at it and it's not there, there are a couple traces of it, but it's nothing like as bad as we thought, then I have to make a decision. Do I believe this report, or do I believe what I heard earlier about it being so prevalent and 3 or 4 million people voting illegally? And I have to ask myself, which one of these is the most likely, and which one of these is better sourced? Which one has the better evidence, and which one do I want to believe? Because if it's something I want to believe, I give it extra credit in terms of staring it down. You want to think that Obama was elected because they stole it from us. The same reason the Dems are doing it with Donald Trump. But it just isn't so. And so my opinion on this has changed. I've said many times, if somebody makes a better argument, then I'll just change my mind. And as far as I'm concerned, I looked a little bit into that study, and it looks like it's true. So it may be an urban myth. It may be that there are other forms of voter fraud. And by the way, before anybody loses their mind and their lunge over this, I'm not saying that voter fraud doesn't happen. I'm saying that voter fraud, according to this report, which sounds reasonable to me, doesn't happen anything like orders and orders and orders of magnitude lower than you would have, that you would need in order to have an effect on the election. So I changed my mind. And it'll stay here until I hear some evidence otherwise, which may come, in which case I'll change it back. But right now, that's the best evidence. It's a good source. It's a reputable study, reputable organization. They don't have an axe to grind with this. And once I accepted the fact that this was actually probably true, I was enormously relieved. I was really pleased that our electoral system is not as corrupted as I had feared it was. And that does not mean that I reverse my position on voter IDs. It'd be nice to lock the barn while the horse is still in there for once. And besides, as I said on that episode with Scott, it's not even about the voter ID. It's about the law. It's about the standards of the law. And the Democrats do not want people to have voter IDs for a very specific reason. So anyway, and we have them, and we do want them for another specific reason. It's different attitudes about life that are based out of different heuristics, and somewhere in there somebody's incorrect, and most often it's them. Not always. Cheryl took me back. No, sorry, got that already. Let's see, we got 2, 3, 4 to go. John Miller has a question. A big challenge will be fighting the right fights. The left will do everything to distract and derail us. We have to keep our eyes focused on the horizon and not get sidetracked by attacks. I think that's going to be difficult for President Trump. My hesitancy in terms of going all in on this guy right up through the election was that I had a very serious concern that he was psychologically incapable of walking away from a certain kind of insult. That if the insult were constructed to hit him right at exactly where he's most tender, and I think he's pretty tender in a lot of places, frankly, but I was worried that if somebody were able to construct an argument or a sentence in such a way that he simply could not respond to it, he had to, he was compelled to. And I saw this in the first debate when Hillary started questioning about how much money he had. Donald Trump had her on the ropes the first 15, 20 minutes of that debate. The second she questioned his money, all he did was talk about how much money he had and how nice the properties were and everything. And I thought, okay, this is it. This is the game. This is showtime now. You're on national television with the debate. And if you're not capable of walking away from an obvious trap like that, then, this is something to worry about. It'd be like if somebody said, if somebody called me a communist, and that meant that I could not function in any other way or any other arguments or do any other thinking until I proved to them that I wasn't a communist, then I would have a psychological problem. So choosing your fights is very, very important. And we spend an awful lot of energy fighting against people who are never going to change. And this is a real problem. I think it's why it was a super, how's it going, baby? I think it was a super, every time I look over there, I get so distracted. Oh, picking battles. If we're serious about it as a movement, we need to do what doctors do when they're faced with limited resources. John's point is correct. We don't have the resources that the left has, and so we have to use them wisely. So how do we decide to do that? And I think it's just simple triage. I really don't think there's much more to it than that. Triage basically says, when it was developed in field hospitals during wartime, triage basically said there are three different kinds of wounded people out there. There are the people who are lightly wounded, who've got some shrapnel in their hand, and they don't need attention right now because they're going to live for at least several days. They're not in any immediate threat of dying. So we're not going to treat those people right now. Also, there are people out there who are so badly wounded, their entire guts are blown out, but they're still alive. They're so badly wounded that we will not have any chance or a microscopic chance of saving them. They're going to die whether we take them into the operating room, yes or no. Those people need to be given pain medication, and they don't get the resources either, because the triage is there to make sure that a limited number of doctors and nurses and hospitals and equipment can save as many lives as possible. The first group is not in any danger because they're lightly wounded. The third group is not in any danger because they're dying and they cannot be saved. And in the middle is a group of people who are wounded severely enough to be life-threatening, but still repairable. So I think that's what we do politically. I think that's exactly what we do. We just simply say, who am I arguing with here? You know, I'm not likely to convince Touré or Roseanne Barr to change your mind, although I would very much like to debate Roseanne Barr and all those ladies on The View and all the ladies on The View and so on. But if you're talking about somebody like that, like Keith Olbermann has gone completely unhinged. I don't know if you've seen his videos, but being fired for 4 or 5 years and being an absolute nobody will drive you mad. Keith Olbermann has lost his mind. And we're not going to win over Keith Olbermann, so let's just triage him out, and let's triage most of these college professors out, and let's just triage them away. And we're never going to turn them. And to spend time trying to argue with these people is to waste time and resources. It's just like barking at a stone wall. It's not going to happen. We're not going to waste time with those people because they cannot be converted. They've got their guts blown out and they're going to die. So they're going to go over here in a corner. We're not going to waste any more resources on them. It's a pity, but we're talking about the real world now. Conversely, there are people that don't need the fight. We spend so much time and effort preaching to the choir. We make all these church movies and movies for people about the benefits of Christianity for people who are already Christians. And we make conservative movies for people who are already conservative. And that's a waste of time, in my opinion. It's not a waste of time, but it's not where we need to put our resources. The resources need to go to the people who can be convinced, to the people who are convinced that they're left-wingers, convinced that socialism is the answer, convinced all of this stuff is right. They 100% believe it, but they can be convinced. They haven't become ideologues yet. They're just misinformed. Some people, when they're misinformed, when you show them that they're misinformed, you make a better argument for them, they'll change their mind. They'll go, hey, that guy's making some sense. So that's where we need to go. And it's a really good point, too, about picking your fights, John. It's absolutely true. And we're going to get trolled by this. And we should troll them, too, by the way. In fact, I think we did Steve Green's episode of Right Angle this week. Hasn't been posted yet. But it's about trolling, specifically trolling these social justice warriors to make them have meltdowns because they look stupid. And on that show I said, and also we should make them have these emotional meltdowns to be kind to them. That would be the kind thing to do. have them face emotional situation they've never had to face, have them be standing next to a challenge that they can't scream their way out of. It'd be good for them too, to start growing up somewhere in their mid to late 30s. Alrighty, here we go. I think 3 left. Bodie Densmore. Awesome name. Here's the question. A reported 50% of American Democrats believe that the Russians hacked voting machines to affect the Trump triumph. All this is derived from mainstream media contentions that Putin hacked into the DNC emails, not that the revealed emails were not genuine. Isn't that a remarkably effective persuasion? How can this effective persuasion be counteracted? Bodie, this is it, right? I mean, this is the whole problem right here. When you ideologically control so much of the scenery, let's just call it the scenery when you drive to work every day. If you control virtually everything that you see, hear, where you go, and so on, you're going to come to conclusions that are not true. This is pretty. Whether or not the Russians were probing our Defense Department servers and got through or not is not the point. They've been doing that since there's been computers. Forgive me for saying so, but that's their job. That's the job of Russian intelligence, is to try to get into our computers and find out what we're doing. Our job is to do the same thing to them. So this business about there's a sudden hack of DNC emails is no. Certainly they were hacked, but hacked by whom? Was it WikiLeaks? Was it Anonymous, that group of computer hackers who seemed to be the only people left reporting the news? Assange says it wasn't the Russians at all, and it was somebody I've heard stories that it was somebody inside the Clinton campaign who saw how awful she was and simply just couldn't bear it, that it was internally leaked. But it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter because of 2 things. It doesn't matter because no one's denying it's true. You made that point. No one's denying it's true. And the news, the media, the movies, the late night comics, nobody goes to that issue. That so many people could be so fooled by something that transparent is very, very alarming. But they're Democrats, so, what do you expect? These people do not believe that Hillary Clinton ever committed any crimes. These people don't believe in any of this stuff. As a matter of fact, these people didn't give a damn about foreign intelligence services hacking into our computers until it cost them an election. And then suddenly it's a major security issue. Hillary Clinton posting the names of actual field operatives and informers who will be killed. Some of them will be killed because she gave their real names. That's not a problem for them morally or ethically or anything. That's, it was convenient for me. It was a mistake and I regret it. But if some information gets out about some comment I made to John Podesta about Bernie Sanders voters, if that gets out, now all of a sudden we have a serious cyber warfare problem. They're children. Brent Cates points out that they were leaks and not hacks. That's an actual good point. There's a very big difference between a leak and a hack. A leak is when you've got a big pot and water's coming out on its own. A hack is when you bash the side of the pot open and then the water comes out. They're coming from different sides of the pot. So the fact that 50% of Democrats believe it because they've heard it from multiple news sources that they have confidence in, but the main reason that many people believe it is because they want to believe it. They want to believe it. And in some cases, in fact, not some cases, many cases, I've just been really shocked at this result. You'd think I wouldn't be. But in many cases, they not only want to believe that the Russians influenced the election, they have to believe it. It's essential for their mental health. They will do, such as it is. They cannot face the day unless they believe it. Because if it turns out that the Russians hacked the election, then they were right after all. All the people who supported Hillary were right. We were the smart ones, and we were the caring ones, and we were the moral ones, and we were the majority, and our ideas are the best, and they cheated. So that's why we didn't get the presidency. But if you take the Russians out of this, where does that leave your garden variety, hash smoking, patchouli oil wearing, hemp imbibing, tie-dyed lunatic? Well, it leaves you, if it wasn't the Russians, it leaves you with a couple of startling realizations that you don't want to face. The first one is you're not the majority that you think you are. The second one is you're not the majority that you think you are. And the third one is that you're not the majority that you think you are. You're not the person who's got the smart idea. You may still retain this idea that I was smarter than they were, but you were outvoted. You were beaten. More people believed the opposite than what you believed. More people believed that she was a crook than that she was honest. And if that's the case, then it puts everything they believe in question. If more Americans, if Donald Trump won the vote, they have to face the fact that there's huge numbers of people that didn't buy what they're selling, which is their little tidy worldview. It's very, very bad for them. They really can't handle it, and it's not hard to understand. If you've been told something, I didn't see the movie. I really want to, called The Room, but if you were raised in a prison cell with no windows, if you're raised in a prison cell with no windows, and you were taught language and given books and everything, and told that the world outside is a tropical jungle, and you've had it described to you in great length, and you can name all of the animals in the jungle and all the rest of it. You just absolutely understand this jungle. And then 18 years old, they open the door and you're not in the jungle, that you're the whole time you've been in the tundra, up in the Arctic. What's your reaction going to be? I don't think it's going to be yippee. The door finally opens. You see what you're expecting to see, and you're completely disoriented, and you're scared. And that's what's happening to them, and it's that's why we're so much more fit than they are emotionally, mentally, intellectually. We're fitter. We're better adapted to survive because we have to deal with their arguments every single day. We're like an animal that has to basically run and catch its meal every day. We're like an animal that has to be fit and face these challenges every day. They're like, they sit there like mushrooms. They don't have to have anything challenged. And when they do get challenged, they don't like it very much, which is really fun to watch, if you really want to know. 2 to go, Susan Speakman. As you may know, Megyn Kelly is jumping ship from Fox to NBC. I think I heard that was a very smart negotiating ploy, that she's actually going to stay. They raised the offer to $25 million or something. We'll let that go for a second. This gives Fox a chance to do better in their nighttime lineup by getting someone with real conservative credentials to host the 9 p.m. hour. Given the opportunity, would you accept the challenge of a nightly show? And if so, what would you call it, and what would the main thrust be? If you wouldn't, why not? I would have said no, I would not do it up until maybe September, October, when I began to really, really realize the danger that we were in. And then I just realized, no, it's not a luxury I can afford anymore. So to answer your question, Susan, yes, absolutely, I would take the job. And as we stated at the beginning of this episode, that is exactly the job I'm going to be taking. I'm going to be on the air live every day, either 10:30 or 11 for half an hour, 45 minutes. And we'll start out looking at the news stories, and we'll just wander around and talk some philosophy and so on. We'll basically do an abbreviated Stratosphere Lounge with a little better production values because we don't want to spoil the brand. I think, the problem with Fox, we're talking about these people not being able to face reality. One of the things they do is they make like a cyst around Fox. What I mean by that is sometimes if you have a foreign object that gets under your skin deep enough and the skin can't just slough it off, it's in there, and your body builds a cyst around it. It builds a really kind of a hard knot of your cells. There are cells, and they basically isolate that foreign body, and they make it they make it so that the immune system's not going to attack it anymore. And that's what they do with Fox News. Whenever anybody says, well, I saw this, and they say, well, where did you see it? I saw it on Fox. Oh, Fox News. Well, there's video. But it's on Fox News. That way they don't have to deal with it at all. They think that they're in the middle. Fox News is way off to the right, and to the left is nothing. They don't understand how how far from mainstream thought most of them really are. Dave Wellman just asked, how can you have better production values with no values? What I was trying to say is the new show will have better production values so that it's not confused with the Stratosphere Lounge, which has a reputation to protect, and that reputation, of course, is being the worst produced show on the internet. And I think this will do it for the night because we got a lot to do today. Matt Karstens says, I'm a statistician and I can see where both the right and the progressives misuse statistics, though in the case of the left it's generally raping them. Well played. However, my experience in explaining statistics is deer in the headlights and accusations of pedantry. How do I explain the importance of proper statistical methodology and inference without looking like or in actually being a pedant or cutting down the intent of speaking truth? Basically, how do I explain statistical truth that may not be obvious without coming off as a blowhard? Well, as we touches on a couple of things we talked tonight about, Matt. First of all, pick your battles, right? I mean, if somebody was going to make some argument about the number of dill pickles that'll fit in a jar, that may not be the time to deploy all of your firepower in order to make a ringing defense that it'll only be 20. You're going to have a limited amount of time to persuade people of things, which kind of goes back to our triage argument. But as probably the first thing you were taught, I think it was Goldstone, William Goldstone, Prime Minister of Britain. There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Statistics are fascinating. We feel that when we have statistics on our side, that we're right. And to be fair, if the statistics are done correctly, that is a tremendous indicator of whatever the point you're trying to make. The two issues here are, number one, people put too much faith in statistics. And number two, it's so easy to get a statistical number that does not represent what you're saying it does. The classic example of this is the difference between a correlation and a causality. I can think of it. There are hundreds of terrific examples, but let's see. The number of snowmobiles in the world have been increasing. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been increasing. Therefore, snowmobiles cause global warming. The two things are parallel, but they're not connected. That was actually a poor example because that lists something up. I don't know. The more water I poured, two things going in the same direction, that's a correlation. They're not connected, that's a causality. And so many people find little correlations. This whole global warming thing may in fact be a gigantic example of this, of a correlation without a causality. The rising temperatures that we saw that were attributed to CO2 were in fact due to solar activity or any number of other things. But they matched each other relatively well for a while, so statisticians went and looked at it and they made their little graphs and they did their hockey stick and everything and said, oh my God, look what's happening to the temperature. Well, then you can actually start looking at where the data points end. One of the arguments I made against Al Gore was in Inconvenient Truth, which is a persuasive movie because these people know how to lie very effectively. And he gave a lot of statistics in Inconvenient Truth, and I suspect that virtually all of them were correct. But when I was watching the movie, he said, we sampled ice cores that went back 650,000 years. And everybody went, oh, and they showed a big graph on how far back 650,000 years were. And my first reaction is the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. What is that? It's at 1% of 1%? Why? 600,000 times 10 is 6 million. Times another 10 is 60 million. Times another 10 is 600 million. Times another 10 is 6 billion. Why are we taking such a small look at things, Al? Why? Why are we looking at such a tiny, tiny, tiny little piece of the Earth's history and using this to make the case? That was the first thought I had, and the reason is because you can make a line if you decide where you're going to start it and where you're going to stop it. If you have a zigzag, let's say, and I'm going to measure from here to here, the line goes up. And if you have a measure from here to here, the line goes up, then it goes down. You have a measure from here to here, and the line goes down. It's the same graph. It's the same data. It's just where are you picking to make your case. So that's one of the real big problems with statistics is they sound very convincing and because they're true. You are, in fact, presenting true information, but you're not presenting all of the true information. I think my favorite example of this I came up with, I'm proud to say it's one of my things I was very, very proud of, was back in the eject days. And I was talking about Michael Moore and how Michael Moore lied his way through Bowling for Columbine. So here's how you lie by telling the truth. Michael Moore could go to Malibu Beach on a particular day, let's say, with a pair of tweezers and a very, very big magnifying glass. If you've ever been on a beach before, you know that the sand is white. From any distance, the sand is white. But if you get close enough to sand, you'll find that there are little dark particles in there. 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000, I don't know what the number is, but you will see that if you hold a handful of sand, while virtually all of the sand particles are white, there are a few dark ones. Now, if Michael Moore were to take a handful of that sand and with his tweezers take only the dark ones out and put them in the bucket, and he did this for quite a long time, then Michael Moore would be able to stand in front of a group of people and he could hold up a bucket and say, take a look at the black sands of Malibu. This sand came from Malibu Beach, and it did. It did. But that's not the whole story, and you know it. If you have 1,000 data points, if you have a table with 10,000 points on it, and you get to pick which points and in which order, you can draw anything. You draw the Mona Lisa, you can draw Godzilla. You can draw anything if you get to control what we pick and what we don't pick. So the biggest problem with statistics is that if people are looking for data or looking for something to back up their argument, they may find a statistic that they think helps them. It may be correlation without causality, or it may be limited sample or whatever. But when you run these things to the ground, you'll find that virtually all of them have limits and error bars. And what do those limits and error bars tell you? If Al Gore is only going to sample 1% of 1% of the Earth's history to make his case and leave out 99.9% of the total climate variations in the Earth, then that makes me suspicious. And it should make you suspicious. And that's how you do it, I think. As far as your point in terms of arguing statistics, Matt, there are so many interesting statistical stories. There's a website out, I don't remember the name of it, but it's a website that features graphs of correlations without causalities. And one of them is the decreasing number of pirates and the decreasing birth rate or mortality rate in Africa. And you chart both these things and you realize that by eliminating pirates, you're making African babies healthier. No. So in answer to your specific question, I would find a couple of really killer examples of how what something appears to be one way is actually not the truth and is actually the other way. And I would save your ammunition for when it really counts, for something important, for the big lie, like the Russian hacking lie. You got to go in there and attack that. And if you can do that, if you have the ability to use those numbers in such a way, you will almost always convince people, because I suspect that you would use your data honestly. And if you use data honestly, it actually survives an examination of common sense. I don't remember if, I think it was during an analysis of the Rodney King trial. Somebody said a good enough lawyer can convince you that an elephant can hang off a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy. And the way he would do that is he would break it down into incredibly minute little steps that all are true, but he's going to miss steps, jump steps, avoid steps, not report steps, so that, yes, one logical step to the other. You're absolutely right. An elephant can hang off a cliff with his tail tied to a daisy. But we all know the truth of that. I saw this when they were doing the Rodney King video. They were saying if you look at the difference between frames number 433 and 434, you'll see that Mr. King's shoulder is rising up. You'll see that that he's rising and that he's trying to reassault the officers. And I said, yeah, okay, but if you play it in real time, it's four guys beating the crap out of him. Now, before anybody loses their mind again, I'm not saying that Rodney King didn't deserve to get the crap beat out of him, because I don't know what happened before that. But yeah, you know what? I take that back. He did not deserve what happened to him. It was just wrong. I have no doubt whatsoever he was a threat. I have no doubt whatsoever he argued with the cops. I have no doubt whatsoever he was giving them a lot of grief. But when you watch the video, you don't get to see the grief. But at the same time, watching the video in real time, it's a guy getting beat up by four guys with sticks for a long time. If there was one of those officers down there trying to get cuffs on him, then this wouldn't be a story. Wouldn't even know his name. But they didn't. So anyway, sometimes the truth and an examination of the truth makes us unpopular. Scott Ott has gotten very unpopular with some people because Scott sees things differently. But Scott Ott believes what he believes based on evidence, and Scott Ott has more integrity and morality than anybody I've ever met. So when Scott Ott says something that disagrees with what I believe, I get, needless to say, I want to kill Scott Ott. But after I get over that momentary discomfort, the cognitive dissonance, then I start thinking, well, if Scott Ott believes it, why would he believe it? If he's a good guy, a smart guy, why would he believe it? And he'll tell me. And more often than not, he'll have a really good case. And then I have to give up another one of these things that I love, another great argument that I use all the time that just isn't true. And I like to think ultimately that's the difference between them and us. Both of us, we're both liberals and conservatives are human beings. They have human emotions and desires like everybody else. But I do think, in fact, I think this is in fact the distinction between liberals and conservatives. Some people are prepared to face unpleasant truths, and some people are not. Some people would rather believe a lie that's comfortable than believe the truth that's uncomfortable. Some people would rather be seen to be doing good when they actually do harm, rather than people who do actual good who seem to be doing harm. It's just a different. They're just built differently. But the good news is that the world is built in a certain way, and that the reason we're conservatives and so on is because we believe that that the world is based on certain things. One of the lines I have that I'm just going to go shoot in there in just in a few minutes about socialism and helping people and going back to help people and giving things up. And I've got a line that said, but people don't behave that way. They don't. They don't. And I can prove it to you right now using your own behavior. Because if you really did believe in wealth relocation or reallocating wealth, then you would take your cell phones down and your Xboxes down to a pawn shop and you would take the cash and distribute it to poor people. That's the evidence that this business of going and helping other people is this noble way to live is nonsense. It's nonsense. People don't behave that way. People will not work as hard for a group, especially a distant group like a government, as they would for themselves. And we saw this all throughout the Soviet Union. These poor peasants, who used to own their land, or at least at the very least used to be able to farm a patch of land that was the same patch of land, they got put on these collective farms, and many of them just refused to go, and millions of them were killed. But what you found, this is one of the first data points I ever heard about the Soviet Union. I remember this very clearly. I was quite young, I think. What I heard was that these people would go out there and work on a collective farm from sunrise to sunset. They just bust themselves, just break themselves with labor, hard labor, nasty, tough farming labor. And then at night they would come back because they were allowed to keep tiny little plot, a tiny little vegetable garden. And they'd put another 3 hours into that because that's theirs. And they get to keep those vegetables, presumably. And that's where they would put all the effort. I remember thinking, wow, you're going to go out and work all day and then come back and do some extra farming? Why? Because it's yours. Because you get to keep it. And And the harder you work on your own garden, the more you get to keep. You get to eat better, you get to sell it, you get whatever. The idea that people will work as hard for somebody else as they will for themselves is just plain not true. I didn't get a chance to put it in this draft. I had it in an original draft, but I'm trying to keep these things down to bare bones. But basically, if you really want to know, if you want to confront somebody about socialism and how willing they are to help other people, just ask a typical millennial teenager and say, if I asked you to go out for the next 3 months on Saturday and you had to be on location at 8 o'clock in the morning and all day long until dark build houses for homeless people every Saturday for the next 3 months, would you do it? They wouldn't do it. I don't even think the true believers would do it. Okay. What if I paid you $5,000 a day? Would you do it then? So what's different? You're not working harder. You're working the same length and effort, duration. All of that's the same. You're still giving up your Saturdays. Why is it that people who wouldn't go out and build housing for the poor for free for 3 months would go out and build housing for the poor if they were being paid $5,000 a day? What's changed? Has their attitude about poor people changed? No. Has their attitude about missing Saturdays changed? Yes. Because they realize now that I'm going to be missing Saturdays for me, not for them. And that's how simple it is to prove that this stuff is not going to work and never does work. So there it is. And I think with that, we'll wrap this baby up. We got off to a late start. It's about an hour and 22 minutes of rambling incohesiveness that I'm sure can be edited into some kind of constructive sentence. In any event, we're very excited about the live show coming up, and we hope you will be too. As always, the Stratosphere Loungers they're the cadre, man. They're the van. They're the hardcore of true believers in this. So I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say, and I like to think it'd be the most effective lever I have for gaining new members, and that is, you're going to get 45 minutes a day. So we'll see soon enough, I guess. I don't expect any reason why I won't be here next Wednesday, so hopefully we'll see you next week for episode 141. But right now, episode 140 of the Stratosphere Lounge is going to go on to the final spinning discs, and then it will sit there for millennia. This show will sit in millennia, and the building it was stored in, it's going to freeze over, and then ice age is going to come, and then mountains are going to appear over it, and then eventually 100 million years from now the mountains will be eroded again, and then somewhere, I don't know, 2 or 3 billion years in the future, there'll be a hard drive with a show on it just sitting there on the beach just waiting for somebody to plug it in and take a look. So that's why we do what we do. In any event, that'll do it for this show. So everybody be happy out there. We got a new start. We got a new year. We got a new president. We got a new opportunity. And now it's the time to run these bastards into the river. So with that in mind, I will see you guys next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.